welcome to What Does My Therapist Really Think?, where we need to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what mental health professionals face every day. Our guest today is Lauren Haaas, licensed school counselor, PhD candidate, and the face behind The Cognitive Counselor on Instagram, which everyone should go and follow right now. It's incredible. And this Instagram really shows what it's like to work as a school counselor. She's an adoptee, an author, and a lovely human. Lauren, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. These are my favorite kind of conversations to have, so I'm super excited.
I have so many questions. I'm kind of bursting at the seams, and I want to make sure I don't over talk. So Katie, why don't you get us started with our first question, and then I'll jump in when I'm ready.
I'd be so honored. Thank you so much. So Lauren, you're so honest about the world of what it's like to work in mental health and work with kids and being the first line of defense for kids. And what is it like today for those of us who maybe haven't been in school for 20-something million years? What's it like today?
Yeah, I think that school counseling has definitely changed a lot. Like when I tell people I'm a school counselor, I think that they picture their guidance counselor, 20 years ago who helped them pick classes. And I think that framing is pretty outdated, and it almost kind of makes me laugh, but also not, because there's so much advocacy to be done in the role for school counseling. I think that what's so amazing about schools is that they're often the only access point that kids have to mental health support. And so a lot of my students would never be able to see a licensed mental health provider outside of school. And so their family doesn't have insurance, or they don't have time, or they don't know where to look. So for them, I'm it. I think there's a lot of weight in that, but also so much power in just being that regulated, consistent adult at the school for them every day. And every day as a school counselor looks completely different. There's no one schedule that I follow. I'm running small groups. I'm dealing with, different behaviors that children have, checking in with kids for one-on-one counseling. And I think the biggest difference between school counseling and mental health counseling is that school counseling is very much more solution-focused, short-term, kind of to help provide supportive structures in the school environment so they can thrive. And it's not meant to really dive into deep trauma work or anything like that, because that just wouldn't be appropriate for children in the school setting. A lot of my job is resourcing families and getting them connected to outside support. And so I think that the world of school counseling has definitely shifted a lot in the years, and I think that people are still figuring out what a school counselor does. I'm really lucky. My role is very protected at my school, and so that means I get to do what I'm actually trained to do. I get to do one-on-one counseling, I get to do small groups, I get to do classroom lessons that are aligned with what we're working on socially and emotionally. And what that means is that all the students are getting access to it, not just the kids that are visibly struggling or the kids whose parents know what to ask for, but every child in the building is getting served. And I think that's the beauty of what school counseling is.
That's amazing. I did not have that in my school. I did not have that.
Me either.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Even as a therapist myself, and somebody who went to school with school counselors, I think the reconceptualization of what a school counselor is so important. So, to be honest, my school counselor is the person that made me think I would never go into therapy, and therapy was, awful. There was a lot going on at home, got pulled in, unfortunately was honest with them. They called home. Parents were like, that's not happening here. Go home, get in trouble. Come back. I was like, yeah, you're right. Nothing was happening. And they're like, this was a success story. And then they would constantly pull me out of class to come have me talk to other kids who were having bad things going on at home, so I could essentially convince them it was all okay. And I dodged that person for the next, X amount of years. I remember seeing them in the mall one time and going and hiding in Hot Topic. And that was my first idea of what a therapist was. I don't really remember therapists being on our TV shows and stuff like that when I was growing up. I know that they were in adult TV shows like The Sopranos, doing crazy things, right? But even when I was in school for my bachelor's degree, I was I would never be that person. I could never betray someone like that. And then eventually had to go to therapy, myself, and was oh, okay, maybe this is where I'm needed and could do the most work. and could go back and help that younger version of myself by helping these kids. I did not go into school therapy myself. I am a clinical mental health counselor, worked in private practice, worked in like intensive outpatient and stuff like that. I think that like going back and helping the version of yourself that was never able to get help is what, if anything, would have pulled me into the school counseling world. And you have a background as an adoptee and lots of other things that make you who you are. How do you feel like that played into your decision to go into school counseling versus clinical mental health or marriage and family or social work, all the other iterations of it that we can do? And how are you trying to change what it means to be a school counselor in your own work? Because I feel like that really shows even on your Instagram.
Yeah, I think that is a very funny story because I actually originally, when I applied to grad school and I interviewed for the clinical mental health track of my program. And I was sitting in the interview and I remember one of the professors saying how many hats school counselors wear. And the more she talked about it, the more I was like, wait, I love kids. My day would not be like, just sitting down all day. Like it'd all be different. And I emailed them directly after the interview and was like, can I switch my application over to the school counseling track? And so that was kind of where it started. And then I got in. And what was really cool about my program is it was like a K-CREP 90 credit program. And so I was able to also get access to be a clinical counselor. And so I'm using my school counseling hours towards my LPC in Oregon, which is really cool. So I kind of can have both experiences. But I think the biggest thing for me was that I love kids. I love the preventative nature of school counseling. I think that early intervention is huge. We're seeing such a huge mental health crisis, and kids are the future, and kids are, where we should be putting a lot of our energy, in my opinion, because I think that they are the most malleable in terms of building those skills and growing up to be, emotionally regulated adults for the most part. My experience as an adoptee definitely has impacted my work in terms of my ability to hold space. I think that growing up, I experienced a lot of like disenfranchised grief, and that's just like grief that isn't publicly acknowledged or socially supported. And I had a loving family and I was, lucky, and those things were genuinely true. But at the same time, I was carrying a lot of grief about identity and where I came from and belonging that I didn't have the language for, and I was alone in it, and I was grieving, trying to go through life and go to school and living these kind of like dual realities was really painful. And so because of that, it definitely led me into the mental health world, and it makes me, want to provide space for children now. When your pain isn't acknowledged, you learn pretty quick to stop showing it, and you internalize, and you get really good at seeming fine. And becoming a counselor, gave me language for my own story, and that's been so transformative. And I finally have frameworks for what I had lived and language for what I have lived. But it also means, that I walk into a session with a kid who's processing identity, abandonment, attachment, belonging, and I'm not just their counselor. I've lived it, and I can hold space for it and see that, and I can never fix anything. And I think that's probably one of the hardest parts about working with young children is they're so vulnerable and they don't have any agency in their lives. So seeing the way they're being treated and the neglect and the abuse can be really, that fix it part. I want to just like take it and take them home with me. It's so sad. And I think that having walked it in a certain way, in a certain capacity, allows me to realize that my ability to hold space for them and see them and listen to them is the most healing thing I can contribute.
It's incredible. I wish you were my school counselor. I know
Me
a lot
too.
of really good school
God.
counselors because of people I went to school with. Like, I can think of 3 off the top of my head who are just the most incredible people. I know that it's totally shifted, but part of me is like, dang it, if I just had you, I could have done blah, 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 blah. It's always that grief. Katie, what was your school counselor, guidance counselor experience back in the day?
Y'all, there wasn't one.
Right. You did say that.
There wasn't one. And there was a college counselor my junior year of high school. And I was like an okay student. I had like a 3.2 GPA, 3.4 GPA, but I did a ton of activities. There's a college out there that would have taken me. And I went in there like, you're screwed. You're you're screwed. And there was no thinking outside the box there was no, they knew I was into like acting and film and writing and stuff like, oh, maybe you could go to LA and like go to the junior college there and transfer to UCLA. Like there was none of that. It was all about trying to make the school look the best it possibly could. And at the time it was, look at our rate of kids going to a 4-year college. It was like, I remember going in and being like, oh, my dreams are crushed. And then budget cuts, they were gone the next year. So I think about that experience so much that if I did have someone who was properly trained and, and that was just a college counselor, just any kind of counselor, I think would have changed so much for me. I was a kid that had great home life and parents to support, but they never went to college, so they didn't know what to tell me. So, I mean, you're doing such important work. But it is crazy because I'm like, no, that didn't even remotely exist. I don't think we have a school nurse. Like, I don't know what happened if someone broke their arm. I don't know.
Was it school, Katie? Did you guys have teachers? Like,
I told you. Lauren, one of my favorite stories about my school is that our senior play, they decided nobody was good enough to be in the play, so they cast the teachers to be the parts.
Oh my goodness. Not very student-centered.
Yeah, it's not, Lauren. No. Anyway, so anyway, it's so great that you're doing this important work. But, when I see this, think, oh, is the system changing for the better? Is the system changing in a way where schools are seeing this as really important work? I'm sure it depends on school district to school district. There are some teachers still participating in the senior plays out there. But I'm wondering if you think that it is changing as a whole, or is it just location by location?
Oh, that's a good question. I unfortunately think that educational system as a whole right now, I mean, we're all seeing it. It's a tough place to be in, and this is a big part of why I'm going back to get my doctorate in counselor education, because I have such a heart for advocacy and research, and I think that the system set in place now isn't really conducive to supporting like longevity in school counselors. I think that a lot of schools, they just don't know what a school counselor does. So they just pile on a bunch of non-counseling tasks. So they put on like testing coordination or covering classrooms or 504 paperwork, and schools are strapped, and usually you think about a school counselor, they're very empathetic. They want to be a team player. So a lot of my graduate experience was professors telling me how to set boundaries and how to advocate for my role. And I think I've experienced that now more than ever. If I'm spending all that time doing stuff I'm not trained to do, that's not my role, then that takes away from the child who's falling through the cracks. And the American School Counselor Association, for example, ASCA, recommends like a 250 to 1 student to counselor ratio. But I think it's like over 75% of counselors are carrying more than that. I feel lucky to have like a 350 to 1 ratio.
Oh my
Can't
God.
do work meaningfully with those numbers. And I think the system really asks us to be everything while systemically preventing us from doing the one thing that really matters.
Wow.
Which I think can burn a lot of counselors out.
Yeah, I mean, of course. And you're just doing so much. You're running groups. You're doing these sort of individual sessions in the school. You're advocating. I'm sure you're educating teachers on like, it's not this behavior, it's this, you're talking to parents. You're kind of doing the social work piece of referring out. In your free time, which I can't imagine you have any of, you've managed to like write and publish a book, and you're getting a PhD. How do you get through your day? How do you decide the next thing you're going to do? How do you feed yourself? Like, I'm fascinated. It's a lot.
I sleep a lot, and I just like when I leave work, I leave it, and I leave at 4. Like I go on my contract hours. I take my sick days, even if I'm not sick. Like
it's money on the table if you don't.
I just think that
yeah,
totally. And I think that's the one gift about being in schools. I get summers off, I get breaks, and so I feel like right as we're about to everyone's about to blow up, then we get a break. So it's kind of you get in the habit of it, and I think the beginning part's hard because you just don't know. You don't know the school, you don't know the students. And for me, my role is so protected, and so that makes me want to stay. That makes me want to be there. That allows me to do what I love to do, and so I feel very grateful for that. And I think if it were the opposite, I would really struggle. But I think the part of just like leaving it there is important for me, and that's been like a muscle I've definitely had to build for sure.
I'm curious, Lauren, what are you seeing right now that kids are dealing with emotionally right now that might surprise people that maybe don't have kids in school right now, or maybe that do and they're missing it?
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know if this one surprises anyone. It doesn't surprise me anymore, but anxiety is just everywhere. I think what surprises me the most about is the intensity of it in elementary age kids, kindergartners with just crippling anxiety is very concerning. The other thing that I've seen a lot is a lot of apathy, the I don't care, the flat affect, the checking out. Because I think anxiety at least signals some engagement, and a kid who has gone completely flat is further downstream in terms of disconnection. And I think I'm watching that disengagement just start younger and younger, and that's scary to me. And I think that the social media piece and the bullying piece, even at the elementary level, is so rampant.
Are kids on social media in elementary school?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
They're on social media, they're on video games, and it's hard because parents are giving it to them. They're tired, they're stressed, you can't blame them. Kids, everything is gamified, everything is, at their fingertips. But on the other side of that, we haven't taught them how to use it ethically. They don't have to be bored anymore. I think that there's such a loss of unstructured time, and what that has done to the kids' window of tolerance. Seeing how kids just struggle to sit in the discomfort for more than a few minutes. Not because they're bad kids, but because their nervous systems have just been so conditioned to expect constant input and instant resolution that makes emotional regulation incredibly hard to teach, because the baseline capacity for patience isn't there. Like when I was growing up, when school ended, there was a real separation. You went home, you were bored, you played outside, you had space to just be, and kids today carry everything with them on their phone. They also have way less recess. They're sitting in a desk.
Why is there less recess? Is that a new thing, or?
It's gone down a lot. Like our kindergartners, so like 5-year-olds, they have one recess.
Really?
Which breaks my heart because 1, kids learn through play. We all know this. And 2, no one's made, not even an adult is made to sit for that long. But, school districts and state regulate, they keep pushing curriculum and they keep pushing standards. But I think what we're seeing is that it's not actually helping our kids perform better academically.
Yeah.
Lauren, I would love if you could tell our audience about the window of tolerance. I'm familiar with that term and use it in my practice, but I know my patients are always like, what are you talking about? So if you could help our Katie's, our audience, anybody that's listening that's not familiar with the window of tolerance, understand it a little bit better and how it plays into your work, that'd be awesome.
Our nervous systems are so conditioned a certain way. And I think that a lot of the times when you think of a kiddo, just think of a calm, regulated kiddo. They're getting consistent food. They're getting consistent attachment from their caregiver. So their window of tolerance for something that's difficult or something that is non-preferred, as we call it in the schools, is a lot greater than that of a child who might have a lot of trauma or is currently living in trauma, just because their nervous system is so ready to go into either hyperarousal, which is think fight or flight, so panic, angry, irritable, just higher energy, hyperarousal. And then there's fawn or shut down, so hypoarousal, where kids have learned to shame themselves, to withdraw, to numb out. I think that definitely is part of the apathy. And I kind of think of it like hyperarousal is those behaviors we see that are externalized, like the flipping the desk or the throwing the Chromebook or the running out of the classroom, which we call eloping, which I love that word. It's so funny to me.
Yeah. It feels so romantic. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Our little eloper. And then hypoarousal, more the internalizing kiddos who are just super hypercritical of themselves or just stop responding to teachers, the defiant kids. I hate that word, defiant. So I think the window of tolerance is just a good way for us to understand like our nervous systems better and understand what our nervous system can handle. Like I'm never going to expect a kiddo who has a bunch of trauma and maybe more adverse experiences to be able to regulate the same way a kiddo who doesn't have that. And that just kind of goes back to how our nervous systems are conditioned at such a young age.
Do you think that there's a trend of what you're saying? Because I know we're talking about social media, and we're talking about screen time, we're talking about this like lack of play and discovery through being bored. Do you feel like there's anything else maybe at home that's contributing to raising a kid that's becoming more anxious or becoming more adept to these ways of dealing with things?
I think absolutely. I think everything is systemic. I think parents are put under so much more pressure now than before, a lot more single parents than there was before. I think that parent attunement is definitely an issue. And I say this with like so much compassion, not judgment, because every parent I meet, I'm like, you are doing the best that you can with what you have and you're tapped, And so the research is showing us that screens aren't just affecting kids in isolation, they're affecting the parent-child attunement relationship itself. And so co-regulation, the warm, connected, the back and forth between a caregiver and a child, it's literally how children learn to self-regulate. And you can't shortcut that developmental process, but when that co-regulation is disrupted, we see the downstream effects. Kids who are dysregulated, who have enormous responses to small things, who don't have that like internal scaffolding to come back down. And that's not like a behavior issue, that's a gap in development. And I think that a lot of that does stem from their home lives. And yeah, I think that parents are doing their best, and they're also, a lot of them, at times, something I've experienced is they'll come to me and kind of want to like fix their kid, or think that, if we just get my kid in therapy, or we just, fix this problem, then everything will be okay and the behavior will stop. But I think a lot of the time, children are almost always reflecting something in the system around them. In research on intergenerational trauma, is very clear. The patterns passed down aren't just behavioral, they're neurological, they're relational, and a child doesn't just come into the world anxious or avoidant or shut down. Those patterns are shaped, and so they often get shaped by what was shaped in the people who raised them. And so from the bottom of my heart, like, parents are doing their best with what they were given, and that's especially true for a lot of the families I work with. I work in a dual language school, and so a lot of my students are immigrants and newcomers. And so they're navigating a new country, a new language, a new system, and the weight they're carrying is so enormous. But it's also hard to implement skills and implement meaningful work with a child if the environment they go home to every day is unaddressed.
So in that, you don't have that much time. Like, it is kind of this rapid style of mental health work. It's not like me, where I can see a patient every week for an hour for years if I need to. You might have this kid maybe 20 minutes.
And you got 310 of them.
Yeah, 3 seconds.
Yeah.
How do you give your parents actionable ways to improve their attunement with their kid? Is there like here's a 101 on how to get more of what you want, more of that connection with your kid, help reduce these behaviors? Is there a simple answer to that? I know that could be a podcast all its own, but nonetheless.
I wish there was a simple answer to that, and if you figure it out, please let me know.
I certainly don't know. I'm just like emotion coaching ? Parent-child interaction therapy ? Right. It's not simple, but yeah.
I think that there is so much there. I think every kid is different.
Of course.
The one thing I love about, I'm so relational. That's like my main focus. And as an adoptee, I've experienced attachment disruptions and ruptures. And so I think that the beauty of school counseling is I'm there every day. They see me every day. Whether or not we're sitting down and, doing an intervention, it's that consistent, positive adult relationship. And usually I'm the only one in their week that actually listens to them, that actually hears them, that actually sees them. And I think if there's anything I ever tell parents, it's like, be curious, we're so quick to shame kids without even realizing it. And I think a lot of what I see is that adults don't know how to regulate their emotions. So when they show up in the kids, they just shame them. They just push them down, put them to the side. And that just makes everything bigger and worse. And the kids trying to behavior is communication. And I always say that. And I think that when we approach it from that lens, it takes the personal part of it out of it. You know, it's a lot less shaming. It kind of externalizes it more. And you can be like, okay, what need isn't being met? Like, what is my child trying to communicate to me that they don't have the words for? And I think when I can reframe things for parents like that, that's kind of when they can understand it a little bit more. And I think that parents also, like, they can do what they want to do. And so what they do with that information, whether or not they apply it, that's up to them. And a lot of the time, there's parents that are willing to do their own inner work and build the capacity to show up for their kids, and some of them just aren't in that place and don't have the resources. Figuring out, okay, how do we support the child's either way?
I mean, it's interesting what you were saying about how school, like, you know, I remember, and nothing makes me feel older than hearing about how different school is. Back in my day, we would, you would get that break. You put your books in the locker. I heard lockers don't exist anymore, and that is nuts. You would put your book in the locker and then you would go home, have a snack, and then do your homework. And that regulation was very grounding. But now, as adults, even as we're living, you know, our work goes with us everywhere. You know, like, you know, parents, some of us work from home. If you don't work from home, you have to answer emails right away. Like, all these things are so important that, like, how can you separate these things? And then your kids are living the same sort of, like, meshy, mushy life of, like, no separation. Of course, we're on edge all the time because we're all on call. Everybody's on call all the time. It's what we're doing as a society that is just being emulated every way around. And the fact that kids are younger and younger with anxiety problems is what a sign of what we're doing.
What a sign.
Yeah.
And I think kids are so full of life, you know, and the more that we put on them and the more, the extracurriculars kids are in, I'm like, guys, they don't need to be an Olympian by the time they're 12.
No.
In fact, if you do that, they're never going to want to play a sport again. You know, I think giving kids play, just unstructured time. Like, if I were to, and I think too, I also hold I'm not a parent, you know, and so when I come to parents, I have so much respect for parents, like so much respect. And I think that parenting is an impossible job. I think that we all fail our children no matter what we do. Like, it's human, it's a relationship. And I think the biggest thing is just like continuing to give yourself grace and like compassion. And I think a lot of times what I see in parents is they're so hard on themselves to like do it a certain way, or when they mess up, just like think that they mess their child up forever. And it's like, no, showing a child repair, apologizing, showing self-awareness, like that teaches them so much more than being the perfect parent. And I think just giving them space to live and to grow and to go run around in the neighborhood and to be bored and to not be on a screen all the time. Those are the gifts that parents can give to kids.
Yeah. And, you know, we're humans and we're learning as we go. My mom, she's 72, and she just told me, she goes, you know, Katie, there was this person in her life that she was just so upset about how they wronged her for so many years. And she goes, you know, I forgave him. And I was like, whoa, cool. And she's like, yeah. And now I'm not angry anymore. And like, I'm not on edge anymore. Should I be forgiving more people? And I was like, yeah, like, we need to talk about these things that's why you need to talk about things. And she's like, oh, yeah. So we started talking about like all these things in our life. Yeah. And she goes, that was really awful. And I was like, yeah, Mom. And that's why mental health is so important. And it can happen at any age, you know?
She went her whole life and no one ever told her that. And I think that's what I love about school counseling is I teach the kids about their prefrontal cortex and their amygdala and about emotions and about, you know, mindfulness. And like, I didn't have those skills. You know, I teach them how to use an I feel statement and how to do butterfly taps. And it's like the fact that they're going to have those skills later on for some of the most important things in life are relational. Like, our world is relational. And so the fact that we've gone through school for so many years without teaching these skills is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
And most of the time when I teach it to the kids, their parents don't know it. And so that also says something about where our world is at.
I find it so interesting that you are sort of in this world where there's so much to be nervous about, but they're also living in a world where there are these skills available to cope and to have, and never a butterfly tap nary a butterfly tap when I grew up. That it is interesting to see, for lack of a better sentence, but how's this going to play out? You know?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that duality of it.
Yeah.
I think the two things coexisting. And I think too, it's like there's days where I come home and I'm just like, oh, like what's going to happen to these kids, you know? But I think they give me hope. Like I love elementary age. They say what they want. They do what they want. And I think that like letting them live in that spirit and not shaming that and giving them the tools to like handle hard things and have hard conversations and to like believe in themselves outside of however they perform, I think is my goal for how I serve them.
They either give you hope or they instill you with fear. And maybe both sometimes. And I know we did that for the generations that were older than us too. It was like they didn't know what to do with us, which made them scared. And then it kind of made them like angry, you know, they hated on the millennials so much. And that's fine. We are annoying. I do get it. But
And I love a good mug.
Yeah, and I love a mug. I have so many mugs.
I love a mug. Lauren, I have a feeling that you're Gen Z, so...
I am Gen Z.
I did assume.
Yes,
I wasn't lumping you in with us.
Yes.
I get lots of flack for being a Gen Zer in a school. It gets brought up on the daily basis. And I'm like, so don't be jealous the kids think I'm cooler than you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I am. I am jealous. I just want the kids to think I'm cool. Sorry, Andy, I interrupted you.
No, it's great.
Just had to bring up a mug.
But I think the way you talk about kids makes me more hopeful for them and less afraid of them. So you're advocating for them in all kinds of ways. But I know another thing that you're really doing with these kiddos is bibliotherapy. And I would love for you to tell our audience like a little bit about what that is. And then you're using diverse literature. It also makes me think of Katie, who can be really hard on herself sometimes about like being an entertainer and like not a mental health counselor. And I'm like, no, storytelling is the way. Like storytelling is like the best, most important thing ever. So maybe you can also make Katie feel good. This podcast is really turning into make Katie feel better about things.
Yeah, Lauren, last episode I made we had an ADHD specialist and I made them give me a diagnosis unofficially, but I was like, I think you should give me a diagnosis.
I love that.
Wink, wink, nod, nod. No, I would love to hear about bibliotherapy. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a fancy way of using books, of saying that you use books as like a therapeutic intervention.
Oh.
And I think that it's so powerful. I think that especially for kids with marginalized identities or, neurodivergent kiddos or kiddos who are more anxious, anything a child might be dealing with where they feel alone or isolated or unseen, a book can bring that's about that experience that can put words to something that they don't have the words for, but they're like, that's how I feel, like that I look like that, or I think that way. It's so healing, and it's so much more healing than any other intervention I could give them, And so, for example, I have this one book, and it's called Are You Mad at Me? And
gotta read
as
it.
an adoptee, I have pretty, severe anxious attachment. And growing up, I remember I would always ask my friends, are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? And I just internalized it and felt so shamed for it. And when I read this book as an adult, I was sobbing. I was like, oh my God, I feel so seen. And I've been using it with kids, and they're just like, oh, I'm not crazy. I think it takes the shame out of that experience for them, because I think a lot of times when we don't see ourselves in the world around us, or we don't see our experience in the world around us, we then think something's wrong with us. And so what I love about books is they can be so powerful in terms of representation and like bridging that gap of like, there's nothing wrong with you. You just are experiencing this thing that other humans also experience. And here's some words for it and a cool story. And it just helps them feel more empowered to be like, I may experience this thing, but it's not who I am. And there's books about all sorts of things now, and that's what drew me to write a book about adoption for adoptees, because there's like literally hardly any children's books about adoption written by someone who is adopted. They're very centered on like, we chose you, we picked you, which kind of further oppresses the adoptee's experience in a lot of ways. And so that for me, even as an adult, doing that was so healing. And I think that bibliotherapy can be used on all ages. And there's so much power in a children's book because it's so simple, you know, and there's so much metaphor and meaning behind things that I think can pull at that like emotional part of your brain, you know, that is like feels seen.
Yeah. And we should mention the title of your book, which is A Heart That Holds It All, A Story of Adoption. I see it's available on Amazon. Anywhere else that people can access this beautiful book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and then it's also on Barnes & Noble.
Ugh, great. Yeah, go get a Frappuccino and read the book. And then buy it. Like that I used to frequent and flip through the magazines because I was bored as a teenager. Let's get bored again.
Yeah.
You know, as we're wrapping up, I'm curious, Lauren, we usually ask our guests for, like, what's a hot take? If there's, like, a hot take, you know, what you're seeing with kids, what you're seeing within, like, the school system, you know, anything that you just feel like is something people maybe, a big opinion that you got.
Oh, I have lots of big opinions, but
Lovely.
Let me think about my most relevant big opinion to this context. I think that kids teach me so much, and I think that if we sit and we actually listen, we can learn a lot from them. And that's would probably be my hot take, is that like they kind of know. They know it all. And I think there needs to be more curiosity and more listening instead of assuming and labeling being done. And I think as an educator, it can be easy to fall into the what's wrong with them. And I think usually, what is this triggering in me? What little part of me feels angry right now because this kid is expressing something that I wasn't allowed to? And so I think that's the biggest. Kids are awesome. That's my hot take.
Do you ever wish you were younger because you knew so much when you were younger, but not in a way of like, oh, teenagers are know-it-alls? Like, you did kind of just have a better handle on things than you have now. Mm-hmm. You know, you had a lot more clarity.
You were just yourself.
Yeah. You weren't bogged down by, everything.
That is so profound of an idea of a lot of educators. What are you upset about this kid about? What is this kid holding up a mirror to you about? I'm so curious. Lauren, this was so lovely. Thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like I learned a lot, and just it's always great to check in what's happening with the kids. What's happening over there with the kids.
Everyone go get the book. Everyone follow her on Instagram. It really is like exceptional. You might learn something for a kid you know, or your own inner child. I know I did. And yeah, we'd love to have you back for other deeper conversations. I feel like you do so much. We could have talked about 9 different things. So we took one layer of your very impressive experience, and we'd love to investigate more down the line. But I think we are at time, and it's time to cue Kenny, who does our music. Right, Katie?
Yep, cue Kenny.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. What Does Your Therapist Really Think is a Drea Media production. Theme song by Kenny Gray. If you want to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, all the socials, go ahead and do it at Drea Vita. Have a question for a future episode? Go ahead and send us a DM. Start your mental health journey today and head to DreaVita.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and send someone this podcast. They might like it. We'll see you next time.